The, wo- the woman who allegedly shot and killed her husband was given a $50,000 bond in Jackson Municipal Court today. Police say around 11:30 yesterday morning, 30-year-old Rashaan Wallace shot and killed 33-year-old Damion Reed after he allegedly attacked her. It happened on Brook Hollow Drive in Jackson. Wallace is charged with murder.
In an increasingly interconnected world, our digital lives are often extensions of our real ones. Social media, designed to bridge distances and foster connections, can sometimes become an unexpected battleground for real-world tensions. Today on True Crime Continent, we delve into a modern tragedy from Jackson, Mississippi, where a seemingly trivial online interaction ignited a domestic dispute that ended in unimaginable heartache. This is the story of Damion Reed and Rashaan Wallace, a couple whose lives tragically intersected with a friend request, a warning shot, and a fatal decision. Americans check their partners' phones without permission at an alarming rate. What often starts as simple curiosity, or even a misguided attempt at transparency, frequently ends in heartbreak. But for one couple in Jackson, Mississippi, it ended in something far worse. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, social media disputes now trigger a staggering 43% of all domestic violence incidents in the United States. This chilling statistic underscores a modern reality. The digital realm, for all its convenience, has become a fertile ground for conflict and control. On the morning of February 23, 2025, at precisely 11:30 a.m., a single Facebook notification would effectively destroy two lives forever. What began as an ordinary Sunday on Brook Hollow Drive, a quiet residential street, would become a horrific crime scene that sent shockwaves through an entire community. Damion Reed, at 33 years old, lived what most would consider an ordinary life in Jackson, Mississippi. He was a father, and by all accounts, dedicated to his family. His wife, Rashaan Wallace, 30 years old, worked as a dedicated licensed practical nurse, LPN, at a local hospital, a profession committed to saving lives every single day. Together, they shared their home with their child, creating what, from the outside, appeared to be a typical American family. That Sunday morning started like countless others before it. The house was quiet, peaceful even. Rashaan was going about her usual routine, perhaps preparing for the week ahead, while Damion relaxed at home. Their child played nearby, completely absorbed in toys and cartoons, utterly unaware that this would be the last truly normal moment their family would ever share. The calm before the storm, a deceptive tranquility that belied the simmering tensions beneath. Like many modern couples, Damion and Rashaan had a unique, yet increasingly common, arrangement: open access to each other's social media accounts. It was a practice born, ostensibly, of trust, or perhaps, as events would prove, the illusion of it. Facebook, Instagram, text messages, virtually nothing was off limits between them. This digital transparency was supposedly designed to strengthen their bond, eliminate secrets, and build the foundation of an honest, unblemished marriage. But can true trust truly flourish when surveillance replaces genuine faith, and every digital interaction is a potential weapon? Asterisk, asterisk. Transparency, as they would tragically discover, can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes, the truth we relentlessly seek and eventually uncover isn't the truth we are prepared to face. On this particular Sunday, a simple friend request notification, flashing innocuously on a screen, would shatter everything they thought they knew about each other. The consequences would be immediate and irreversible. Trust issues had, in fact, been simmering beneath the surface of their marriage for months, perhaps even years. Friends and family members would later recall subtle but unsettling signs that all wasn't well in the Reed Wallace household. There were whispered conversations about Damion's jealousy, arguments that seemed to ignite too quickly, and an underlying tension that often made social gatherings with them uncomfortable. Rashaan had confided to a close friend that Damion sometimes questioned her interactions with male colleagues at the hospital. Working in healthcare, her profession naturally involved daily collaboration with doctors, technicians, and other medical professionals. What should have been normal, professional workplace relationships became insidious sources of suspicion and interrogation at home, fueling Damion's growing paranoia. Meanwhile, Damion, perhaps feeling insecure or neglected, felt that Rashaan was becoming distant, spending more time engrossed in her phone and less time engaging with her family. He misinterpreted her occasional need for privacy as secrecy, her professional friendships as potential threats. Neither of them fully realized how dangerous this insidious cycle of mistrust was becoming, or how fragile their peace truly was. Neither of them knew that a simple Facebook notification, seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of things, would change everything irrevocably. It was just after 11 a.m. when Damion picked up Rashaan's phone. Perhaps he was bored, idly scrolling. Perhaps he was looking for something specific, his suspicions gnawing at him all morning. Or perhaps, as is often the case in relationships laced with mistrust, paranoia had simply compelled him to search for what he feared most. Whatever his motivation, what he found on that screen would trigger a chain of events that couldn't be undone. There was a Facebook friend request from another man. But it wasn't just the request that caught his attention. Below it, there were messages, conversations that Damion had never seen before. His heart must have started racing, a cold knot tightening in his stomach, as he scrolled frantically through the exchange between his wife and this stranger. The messages weren't explicitly romantic. They were seemingly friendly enough, filled with compliments about her profile pictures, casual conversation about work, the kind of digital flirtation that walks a dangerously thin line between innocent and inappropriate. For Damion, however, it crossed every line that mattered. In his mind, this was undeniable proof of betrayal, the complete shattering of the fragile trust they had barely maintained. Rashaan. Damion's voice cut through the peaceful Sunday morning like a knife, raw with accusation. She could hear the sheer, unbridled anger in his tone before she even saw his face. When she walked into the room, she found him standing rigidly, holding her phone, his expression a terrifying mixture of hurt and rage that she had never witnessed before. Who is this? He demanded, shoving the screen violently toward her face. Why is this man messaging you? How long has this been going on? The questions came in a rapid, unforgiving fire, each one more accusatory, more venomous than the last. Rashaan, stunned and perhaps genuinely bewildered by his intensity, tried to explain that it was nothing, just a casual conversation with someone who had merely sent her a friend request. But Damion wasn't listening to explanations. In his mind, he had already condemned her. The trust that had been fragile was now completely shattered, replaced by a torrent of raw emotion. What started as questions quickly escalated into furious accusations, and those accusations spiraled into shouting that echoed throughout their home. According to Rashaan's later testimony, the verbal confrontation quickly turned physical. She claimed that Damion became increasingly aggressive as the argument intensified, his movements becoming more menacing, moving closer to her in a threatening manner. The man she had married, the father of her child, was now someone she barely recognized, consumed by a blinding rage. I tried to explain that the messages meant nothing, Rashaan would later recount to investigators, her voice undoubtedly trembling with the memory. But he kept getting more and more angry. He started moving toward me, and I could see in his eyes that he wasn't going to stop. I was scared for my life. Fear, primal and overwhelming, took over any vestiges of rational thinking. Rashaan, a nurse trained to handle medical emergencies with calm professionalism, found herself in a crisis she was utterly unprepared for. In that moment of intense terror, she retrieved a firearm from somewhere in the house, a weapon that was supposed to protect their family from outside threats, not become the instrument of their own destruction. The first shot was meant as a desperate warning. Rashaan later claimed she fired into the air, hoping the deafening sound would shock Damion back to his senses and make him halt his furious advance. In her mind, this wasn't an attempt to hurt him. It was a desperate plea for him to calm down, to step away, to avert the impending disaster. But when fear and rage collide, can a warning truly be heard, or is it lost in the deafening roar of escalating violence? The warning shot, tragically, had the opposite effect. Instead of retreating, Damion continued moving toward her. Whether he was driven by pure, unadulterated rage, disbelief at her defiance, or some terrifying combination of both, he didn't heed the clear, unmistakable signal that his wife was armed and utterly terrified. I kept telling him to stop, to back away, Rashaan would later recount, the memory surely etched into her soul. Asterisk, but he just kept coming. I was scared for my life in that moment of panic. Asterisk, with adrenaline coursing through her veins, her medical training telling her to act decisively in a crisis. Yet facing a threat she was ill-equipped to handle, she made the fatal decision to fire again. The second shot found its target. The bullet struck Damion in the stomach, and he collapsed instantly to the floor of their home. The man who had been advancing toward her in anger, consumed by digital jealousy, was now lying motionless, bleeding on the very floor where their child played just hours earlier. The sudden, horrifying silence that followed the gunshot was deafening. For a moment, Rashaan stood frozen, staring at her husband's motionless body on the floor. Then, her professional training as a nurse, years of instinct honed in emergency situations, overrode everything else. Muscle memory, etched by countless critical moments in a hospital, took control of her actions. She dropped to her knees beside Damion, her hands still shaking from the confrontation, and began chest compressions with the precision she had performed countless times in the emergency room. "Come on, Damion, stay with me," she whispered, her voice raw, as she worked frantically. The irony must have been a chilling realization. She was fighting desperately to save the life of the man she had just shot. Blood was pooling beneath him, and she knew from experience that time was running out fast. Her medical expertise told her exactly how serious the wound was. A gunshot to the abdomen could damage vital organs, cause catastrophic internal bleeding, and lead to irreversible shock within minutes. She applied pressure to the wound, her scrubs becoming soaked with her husband's blood as she continued CPR. But even with all her training, even with her frantic, desperate attempts to reverse what had just happened, she could feel him slipping away. His breathing became more labored, his pulse weaker, the light in his eyes dimming. The man who had been shouting at her just minutes earlier was now fighting for every last breath, a battle he would lose. Rashaan called 911 while still performing CPR, her voice breaking, fractured by shock and terror, as she tried to explain the unimaginable situation to the dispatcher. Asterisk, "I need an ambulance immediately. My husband has been shot. I'm performing CPR, but he's losing consciousness." Asterisk, the words felt surreal, detached, coming out of her own mouth. Jackson police arrived at Brook Hollow Drive within minutes of the emergency call. Officers found a scene that would stay with them for years. A woman in blood-soaked clothing kneeling beside a man's lifeless body, still attempting to revive him despite the obvious futility of her efforts. Paramedics rushed in behind the police, their faces grim, but it was already too late. Damion Reed was officially pronounced dead at 11:57 a.m., less than 30 minutes after the argument had begun. The argument that started with a Facebook message had ended with a husband dead and a wife facing murder charges. Crime scene investigators immediately began the meticulous process of documenting everything. The position of the weapon, the blood patterns, the precise positioning of the body. Rashaan was still in a profound state of shock when the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for murder," the officer stated, reading her rights as she stared, numbly, at her husband's covered body. The woman who had spent her career saving lives was now being charged with taking one. Throughout this entire tragedy, there was one innocent victim who witnessed everything, or at least its terrifying immediate aftermath: their child. Police found the little one hiding in another room, traumatized and confused by the sudden, violent shouting, the gunshots, and the sudden arrival of strangers in uniform. Child Protective Services was immediately called to the scene. This young person had lost a father to violence and was about to lose a mother to the criminal justice system. The psychological impact of witnessing such profound domestic violence at such a young age would undoubtedly require years of therapy and support. Neighbors later reported hearing the argument escalate, followed by 2 distinct gunshots. Some had considered calling the police during the shouting but hesitated, thinking it was just another private marital dispute. By the time they realized the severity of the situation, the tragic deed was already done. News of the shooting spread quickly through Jackson's tight-knit community. Neighbors who had known the couple were stunned by what had happened in their quiet residential area. "I never would have expected this," said one neighbor who had lived on Brook Hollow Drive for over a decade. Asterisk, "They seemed like such a regular couple. You just never know what goes on behind closed doors." The shock was compounded by the fact that Rashaan was a healthcare worker, someone the community trusted to save lives. Local news stations began covering the story, and social media buzzed with speculation and rumors. The case would soon become a topic of heated debate about domestic violence, self-defense, and the deadly consequences of jealousy. The following Monday morning, February 24, 2025, Rashaan Wallace stood before a Jackson County judge, still wearing the same clothes she had been arrested in the day before. The courtroom was packed with reporters, curious onlookers, and family members from both sides, all trying to make sense of the devastating events. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the charges as Rashaan stood silently beside her court-appointed attorney. Murder in the first degree, a charge that could result in life imprisonment or even the death penalty if convicted. The immense weight of those words seemed to hit Rashaan for the first time since her arrest. When it came time to set bond, the prosecution argued forcefully that Rashaan was a flight risk and a danger to the community. "Your Honor," the prosecutor declared, the defendant took the life of her husband in cold blood over a social media dispute. This was not self-defense. This was murder motivated by jealousy and rage. The defense countered with a starkly different narrative, one that would become central to their legal strategy. "Your Honor," Rashaan's defense attorney argued, "my client is a respected healthcare professional with no prior criminal record." She was defending herself against an increasingly aggressive spouse who had become physically threatening. This was a tragic case of domestic violence that escalated beyond anyone's control, forcing her to act to save her own life. The judge listened carefully to both sides before setting bond at $500,000, an amount that reflected the serious nature of the charges, while acknowledging that Rashaan had no history of violence. For a nurse's salary, this might as well have been $5 million, effectively ensuring she remained in custody. Rashaan's self-defense claims became the cornerstone of her legal strategy. She maintained that Damion had become physically aggressive after discovering the Facebook messages, and that she genuinely feared for her safety. "I never intended to hurt him," she told investigators during questioning. "I just wanted him to stop coming toward me. I was terrified." But how does a court disentangle the terror of the moment from the deliberate act of pulling a trigger? Investigators, however, weren't entirely convinced by her version of events, or at least, they felt there was more to uncover. They began looking deeper into the circumstances surrounding the shooting. As news of the case spread online, rumors began circulating that there was more to the story than what had been officially reported. Social media platforms buzzed with speculation from people claiming to have inside knowledge of the Reed-Wallace relationship. The most persistent rumor involved a third party, specifically that Rashaan had been having an affair and that her supposed boyfriend might have even been present during the shooting. Some online commenters suggested that this mystery man was the real shooter and that Rashaan was taking the blame to protect him. "I heard from someone who knows the family that there was another man there that morning," one Facebook user posted. "She's covering for him because she loves him more than she loved her husband." These unconfirmed claims spread rapidly through social media, gaining traction despite having no official confirmation. Other rumors suggested that the Facebook messages that triggered the argument were just the tip of the iceberg, that Damion had discovered evidence of a full-blown affair that had been going on for months, pushing him to the brink. The speculation about a possible boyfriend intensified when investigators began examining Rashaan's phone records and social media activity more closely. They discovered that the Facebook messages Damion had found were indeed just a small part of a much larger digital trail of communications. Phone records showed frequent calls and text messages between Rashaan and several male contacts, including some that occurred late at night, well after Damion would have been asleep. While none of these communications were explicitly romantic, they painted a picture of a woman who was maintaining relationships that her husband was entirely unaware of, feeding into the very suspicions he harbored. One particular contact stood out to investigators, a man who worked at the same hospital as Rashaan and who had been in frequent communication with her in the weeks leading up to the shooting. When questioned, this individual claimed their relationship was purely professional, but his nervous demeanor and evasive answers during the interview raised red flags for the seasoned detectives. The investigation team decided to expand their inquiry beyond just the events of that Sunday morning, delving into the months and weeks that preceded the fatal confrontation, seeking a clearer picture of the dynamics at play. Detective Sarah Martinez, the lead investigator on the case, began conducting extensive interviews with friends, family members, and co-workers from both sides. What emerged was a complex, painful picture of a marriage that had been struggling, perhaps silently, for much longer than anyone had initially realized. Rashaan's co-workers at the hospital described her as professional and dedicated, but several mentioned that she had seemed distracted and unusually stressed in recent months. She was always checking her phone during breaks, one nurse recalled, and she started working extra shifts, staying late, even when she wasn't scheduled. Meanwhile, Damion's friends painted a picture of a man who had become increasingly suspicious and controlling. He would ask us if we had seen Rashaan talking to other men. One friend revealed, he seemed obsessed with the idea that she was cheating on him, even when there was no concrete evidence. These conflicting narratives, each offering a fragment of truth, created more questions than answers. Was this a case of justified self-defense, premeditated murder, or something else entirely, a tragic culmination of fear, jealousy, and betrayal? The legal proceedings would attempt to untangle this complex web of human emotion and action. The Reed Wallace case represents far more than just one tragic incident. It reflects a disturbing, growing trend in American domestic violence statistics. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, approximately 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. That staggering figure translates to more than 10 million women and men annually. What makes this case particularly significant is how it brutally demonstrates the deadly intersection of traditional domestic violence with modern technology. The National Domestic Violence Hotline reports that digital abuse now occurs in an astounding 97% of domestic violence cases. Social media platforms, once designed to connect people, have become insidious battlegrounds for jealousy, surveillance, and control. The statistics are staggering. Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime, and firearms are tragically used in approximately 5% of these incidents, making them 5 times more likely to be fatal. Social media has fundamentally changed how relationships function in the 21st century. Platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and even dating apps have created new opportunities for connection, but they've also introduced unprecedented challenges for couples attempting to maintain trust and healthy boundaries. Digital jealousy has rapidly become a leading cause of relationship conflict. Partners now have instant, often unfettered, access to their significant other's entire social network, complete with photos, comments, and private messages. What might have been innocent interactions in the past can now be scrutinized, screenshot, and weaponized as evidence of infidelity, fueling arguments and deepening mistrust. Relationship experts consistently warn that constant digital surveillance creates a toxic environment where genuine trust simply cannot flourish. When couples feel the need to constantly monitor each other's online activity, it often indicates deeper, unresolved issues that require professional intervention, not simply increased surveillance. The Reed Wallace case shows, with chilling clarity, how quickly digital suspicion can escalate into devastating real-world violence. Self-defense claims in domestic violence cases present incredibly complex legal challenges that courts struggle with regularly. The law requires that defendants prove they reasonably believe they were in imminent danger of death or serious bodily harm, and that the force used was necessary and proportional to the threat they faced. In Rashaan's case, several factors complicate her self-defense argument. First, she had access to a firearm, while her husband was reportedly unarmed. Second, she fired a warning shot, which suggests she had a moment to consider alternatives before firing the fatal shot. Third, the physical evidence from the scene must convincingly support her claim that Damion was advancing toward her in a physically threatening manner, leaving her no other recourse. Legal experts note that women who kill their abusers face unique challenges in court. Juries often struggle to understand why someone would stay in an abusive relationship, or why they didn't simply leave rather than resort to violence. These cases demand careful, nuanced examination of the psychological dynamics of domestic abuse, where fear and perceived threats can be as real as physical blows. Perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of this entire tragedy is its profound impact on the surviving child. Research consistently shows that children who witness domestic violence suffer long-term psychological trauma that can affect their development, their future relationships, and their mental health for decades. This young person has experienced the ultimate childhood nightmare, watching one parent kill the other. Child psychologists emphasize that witnessing such violence can lead to post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and a range of behavioral problems. The child has not only lost a father to death, but may also lose a mother to the prison system. Studies indicate that children exposed to domestic violence are tragically more likely to become victims or perpetrators of abuse in their own adult relationships, perpetuating a painful cycle. Breaking this cycle requires intensive therapy, stable caregiving, and robust community support. The extended family, alongside social services, now face the immense, heartbreaking challenge of helping this child heal from unimaginable trauma. The Jackson community's response to this tragedy has been mixed, reflecting the complex emotions that domestic violence cases often generate. Some residents have rallied around Rashaan, organizing fundraisers for her legal defense and for the care and support of her child. They view her as a victim of domestic abuse who was forced to defend herself in a desperate moment. Others in the community believe justice demands accountability for Damion's death, regardless of the circumstances that led to it. They argue that taking a life, even in self-defense, requires serious legal consequences. Local churches and community organizations have struggled to provide support while remaining neutral in the legal proceedings. The case has sparked important, overdue conversations about domestic violence resources in Jackson. Many residents were surprised to learn how few shelters and support services exist for abuse victims. Community leaders are now actively discussing ways to expand these critical resources, hoping to prevent future tragedies. The tragedy that destroyed the Reed Wallace family offers critical lessons that could save lives if we are willing to listen. The most important takeaway is recognizing that domestic violence rarely happens overnight. It builds gradually, through insidious patterns of control, jealousy, and escalating conflict that often go unnoticed until it's too late. Warning signs include excessive monitoring of social media activity, baseless accusations of infidelity, isolation from friends and family, and arguments that escalate disproportionately to their triggers. When partners feel the need to constantly check each other's phones or social media accounts, it signals deeper trust issues that require professional intervention, not simply increased digital surveillance. If you recognize these patterns in your own relationship or in the relationship of someone you care about, please know that help is available. The National Domestic Violence Hotline operates 24 hours a day at 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233. They provide confidential support, safety planning, and local resources. For immediate danger, always call 911. Friends and family members also play crucial roles in prevention. If someone you care about shows signs of being in an abusive relationship, offer support without judgment. Sometimes, just knowing that someone cares can provide the strength needed to seek help. Most importantly, remember that children are always the innocent victims in these situations. If you suspect a child is witnessing domestic violence, contact local child protective services or law enforcement. Breaking the cycle of violence requires community involvement and the courage to speak up when something isn't right. The tragic story of Damion Reed and Rashaan Wallace serves as a stark warning about the hidden dangers lurking in plain sight, amplified by our increasingly digital lives. It is a powerful call to vigilance, to open conversation, and to the unwavering support needed to protect those vulnerable to domestic violence. If this story impacted you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more true crime stories that matter. Together, we can raise awareness about domestic violence and potentially save lives by recognizing the warning signs before it's too late. What safety precautions do you practice, and what are your thoughts on navigating relationships in the digital age? Share below and join our community dedicated to protecting vulnerable lives. Until then, stay safe out there